Hi.
So smooth.
歡迎收聽 Oh, wait a minute. Today's episode is in English. Welcome to the Kong Indie Podcast.
Yo, yeah.
Yeah, and today we have Professor Francois Mio and Eric and myself, John. We're going to be talking about indie scene. Specifically, we'll be asking questions like, what is an indie scene? And we'll talk about what is the Hong Kong indie scene. In a kind of brief way, as in detail as we will go. And so today we are sponsored very generously by Drover's Thirst, who specialize in importing creative and unique Australian beers to Hong Kong. We should have turned this around because the labels are so nice. And yeah, so they import great craft beer brands like Banks Brewing, and we're drinking today. We also have Seasonal Brewing Co. and Nowhere Man Brewing, and you can get these online at their shop or at bottle shops around town, like Out of the Brew and Craftissimo and many more. And so, if you guys want great craft beer, check them out. Drover's Thirst. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Wait. How's that one?
Well, I tell you what, it's great, but I don't think I've actually ever had barley wine before, so I would not know how to compare it, actually.
Cool.
But
I think it's
great.
like music genre. It doesn't matter what the genre is as long as you enjoy it, right?
That's right. A very nice transition it is. You did it on purpose.
I thought of it in the moment.
Yeah.
I guess that's intent, right?
Yeah. You're becoming
Nice.
more like legitimate as a podcast host.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, getting good at it.
With intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting that improv in. Okay, so I think we should do introductions. I'll just introduce myself really quickly. I'm Jonathan Chan. I'm a PhD student in ethnomusicology, specifically researching the Hong Kong indie scene, and specifically topics of like identity, subculture, maybe even links to other Asian scenes and such. I finished my first year just now. So,
Francois?
Oh, sure. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities and Creative Writing at HKBU, the Hong Kong Baptist University. I work on several different things, but I would say that music has been at the core of the kind of interest that I have and the kind of research that I do. So I would say that I've been researching indie, independent, experimental kind of music in different locations. Perhaps I should, yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote my PhD on the independent music scene in Montreal. I've done some work about independent music scenes in Europe. Now I'm also working, I would say, with the indie or... Yeah, this is, I guess, the topic for today, right? Like, what do we call it? Let's say left field music, perhaps, to give it another term that maybe will add to the confusion in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Okay. So this is me, Eric here. I introduced myself last because I always think I'm the odd one out in this group because I actually teach English. I'm a linguist, but I have been in the scene for how many years? Oh, this is my 20th year in the scene already. I started playing in the scene since 2003 in a riot girl band called Hard Candy. And then I started my own band called Innisfallen in 2005. And then I've been playing in different bands and I have my own solo project. So I've been active in the scene for quite a while. But then my master's dissertation is about Hong Kong popular music. Written in English. So it's something to do with the language question that we always have here, because in the past we always talked about English music or English lyrics in the local Hong Kong music with bands and things like that. But since we have the TV dramas, they start to have more and more like Cantonese songs. So I investigated this language question in my master's degree dissertation and wrote a chapter about it and interviewed a few fellow musicians in a book chapter. So this is me, basically. So let's get on with it. The topic of indie.
I actually didn't know your master's dissertation was on indie music in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually the same topic that I had in the book chapter, but it's just that I extended the study with kind of like semi-structured interviews.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, but I think like a good question that we can start on is, what is a scene?
Big question.
Yeah, actually, like I'm interested to know. Actually, no, we should get into the background of Hong Kong because we like with this being in English and stuff. I think more people are going to be I think scholars overseas might watch this. So I think we should also give a kind of brief introduction to the Hong Kong entertainment / cultural sphere.
That's a fair starter, I think.
Yeah.
I think you guys are more qualified.
Okay. I think when I introduced myself, I actually talked a little bit about the music scene in Hong Kong, because in the past, when we had like immigrants coming to Hong Kong to play in bars and restaurants and things like that, they're basically doing the music in English, and then influenced by the music scene in Shanghai as well as Taiwan. Many of the old songs were in Mandarin, but since I should say we. I don't know why I keep a distance from the music back then. Since they had the TV dramas with the theme songs going on, they start to focus more on writing Cantonese music or music in Cantonese. So bands such as Sam Hui's The Lotus start to consider writing songs in Cantonese, or start to think about writing or singing songs in Cantonese. And then we've got more artists like Roman Tam and Lisa Wang, etc., who would sing the TV drama theme songs in Cantonese. And then we have the stars rising in the 80s, like Leslie Cheung, Annie Mui, and Alan Tam, and so on, who sold the music to the other Asian areas, like Greater China area, like Taiwan, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, and everybody was crazy about Hong Kong culture. So nowadays, even when you go to Korea, people will still know a Leslie Cheung song, like Ying Hong Bun Sik, those kind of songs.
And it kind of went with the movie culture as well, right? Because a lot of the singers were also actors, right?
Yeah, the pop culture movement at that time. And because of the popularization or popularity of karaoke's, like invented by our great Japan. Not sure whether you can cut it. Like invented by Japanese people. I'm trying to be like politically correct, but
it's fine.
I think it's fine. Like music companies' first consideration is to sell songs to karaoke bars, and that's why if you produce English songs, better if you can produce Cantonese and Mandarin songs, but if you produce English songs, you usually don't have a market, because although we speak two languages, but English is not our main language. For the most time, we speak Cantonese in all situations in Hong Kong. Like you learn English at school, but there's no way you can converse in English in other situations, let alone like writing English songs. So the market consideration would be that it has to be Cantonese. It has to be like you have to be a star material, and you have to be able to sing in Cantonese or Mandarin, so that you can go abroad, to go to Japan and Korea and Taiwan and even mainland China to sell your music. So that's basically what it's like to be in the quote-unquote mainstream scene in Hong Kong. Yeah, so
I think that was a great introduction of the history, but like beyond the history that I would be able to confidently, like way beyond, like talking about when Cantonese became part of popular music in that sense, you know, like at least past the Namyam, like the like that kind of traditional
or the Canto opera.
Yeah, like
kind of
past Cantonese opera kind of era of entertainment. And I think maybe I can also describe a little bit of what it's like right now, where I think at least before the pandemic, the entertainment sphere was definitely dominated by either record labels or TV channels, right? It was it's either going to be TVB, ATV died as well, so it's basically just TVB back then. And then you have the three major labels as well as the two major local labels, which was Wanga's and Media Asia.
Wana, is it BMG? No,
I don't think so. I think they're separate. Okay, we'll look it up.
Go on, yeah.
But yeah, there's a couple like Ying Wong, Emperor Entertainment. You know, they're like a very big conglomerate in Hong Kong when it comes to entertainment, especially movies. And so because the companies and the media have such a strong link together, they kind of dominate the entire cultural landscape. And you know, and musically speaking, when we want to talk about style, Canto pop is really not that diverse compared to the mainstream music I think that we find in the charts in other countries, like Western countries, for example. You know, where you know you might have a hip hop song by Drake, or I sound so stupid if the people anyway. You know, you might have like hip hop at the top this week, and then next week it's like bedroom pop. And then the next week it could be like indie pop. Yeah. And whereas in Hong Kong every week Canto pop.
Homogeneous than
it's homogeneous. Yeah, like it could be a ballad this week, and it could be a ballad next week, and it could be the ballad for like the next 52 weeks. Yeah. And you know, the diversity is quite narrow in that sense, if we talk about it relatively speaking anyway.
I think one of the critique that has been made of Canto pop is that it tends to be very formulaic. I mean, every pop music is formulaic to an extent, but it is particularly perhaps clear when we talk about Canto pop historically anyways. Now maybe it's changing, but
I think the post-pandemic landscape is quite different. Because I think so this kind of contextualizes what we're talking about when we talk about indie in Hong Kong. It's definitely contextualized against this backdrop of you know, this entertainment domination of like a very perceived to be a homogenous kind of musical style, and so it's quite jarring to many people that, you know, now some hip hop is on the charts and they're consistently on the charts. You know, they're selling out shows as big as maybe not as frequently yet, but as big as, you know, those Canto pop stars, you know.
So Canto pop is never a genre to me then. It's more like the term that defines the language that the songs are in. So because as you said, it's all about having a pattern in the songs, the homogeneity, right? So Canto pop can be a genre, but it's more like a term of language.
Maybe a kind of approach to music making.
Yeah. So if someone says that your music is Canto pop, so what does it mean then?
And certain. I would agree with you, or at least so. This is my very sort of, you know, outsider or foreigner perspective. I think that one of the things that struck me when I first came to Hong Kong, this was, I guess, in 2014, was turning on the TV, turning on the radio, or entering a shop or a supermarket, just how it was everywhere, this particular kind of you know, popular music sung in Cantonese, but to my ears it really sounded like there was a generic quality to it. It tended to be a kind of you know, and I'm not using this word to, you know, to convey a kind of negative opinion, but I would say syrupy kind of ballad style.
I wouldn't disagree.
and again, you know, syrupy can be good. I like syrup.
Sure.
I
like
but then I as I, you know, spent more time in Hong Kong and I met different people and they introduced me to different artists that fall within under the umbrella of Cantopop, going back to, let's say, Beyond or even before this, right? So you mentioned Sam Hui. Then I came to realize that, okay, sure, it is not really a genre, as you say, right? Like, it is stylistically diverse. There's definitely airs, but there are some main sort of features that tend to come up more often, probably.
Like, I think what comes to mind is the 快歌慢歌.
Yeah, fast
dichotomy.
songs, slow songs.
Yeah, so like in Cantopop, like when I go to concerts or something, you would hear people say like, "Oh, this is a fast song," and then this is a slow song, but they wouldn't. There's no more like. I mean,
going
maybe
beyond the labels.
Yeah.
So to me, it's quite like a power thing. So when you talk about like some Cantopop stars, who has more money or who is more who is better known in the scene, can actually choose different genres they want to like explore in.
Right. Yeah.
So the more popular they are, the more possibilities that they can choose the genres. So it's not like so Cantopop to me is more like a generic identity label. So for those who are in the scene doing mainstream things, so we have a coverall term like Cantopop, but then the audience don't care too much anyway. As you said, fast songs, slow songs, and that's all they care about. Something that they can dance along with, or something that they can resonate with, like they focus more on lyrics than the music genre, because the songs out there are like, as you said, syrupy or sugary, that kind of thing, or a little bit melancholy at times when it's a sort of slow ballad that they can resonate or echo with, especially when they're all about like love songs or heartbroken songs. So something that they can relate to more lyrically than musically. So that's why when we touch upon the topic of indie very soon, we will know that we get touched upon, or we get touched by things that are not just lyrical influence or lyrical, that kind of connection. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that then when we talk about Cantopop, we're implicitly mostly referring to a kind of industry, you know, a group of conglomerates, as you mentioned, Jonathan, earlier, that, you know, that might be the closest thing that could be called truly Cantopop?
I think one thing that struck me, and it struck me because even though I was born and raised here, my parents, like, they didn't listen to any Cantopop, and I didn't really follow my friends to listen to other Cantopop or Mandopop, that kind of thing. I went straight into like Western rock music, and so I was pretty insulated from that culture. But I was very surprised with the awareness of the corporatism of my friends when they talk about artists that they know. You know, they'll be like, oh Warner's doing really well with them, and like, I think if you ask if you ask the same equivalent Western fan about what label is Billie Eilish on, I don't think they would be able to answer.
Discuss it.
Yeah, like I think it would be even like a dirty word to discuss it too much, unless, you know, they're obviously like like really you know, unless it's like really in the foreground. But like people are very aware. It's almost like a kind of football club kind of thing where people go like, oh this person's under Warner, this person's under Emperor, and this one's under Sony Music, and like oh, this person left this label, went to the other label, what music are they going to make next? Like
traitors.
Maybe.
That's really interesting. I never thought about it this way. Another thing, if I may add, which, you know, my foreigner kind of perspective is, again, when I first came to Hong Kong, I was struck by we use the word homogeneous, right? The homogeneity of the sounds that were coming out of TVs and radios and shops. Whereas I you know, having spent time in Canada, in Europe, you know what you're getting if you're tuning to a specific radio station.
Oh,
There's
right.
your rock
They're like
radio
genre segmented, right?
exactly. There's more segmentation, which I felt, and I don't know whether my perspective was accurate or not, but
Yeah.
at least at that moment, I felt like, oh, wow, you know, I can't really sort of like tune the dial and then hear a different sound, really. Like, oh, here's like a hip hop kind of like thing, or if I look at this TV show, it's going to be, you know, like there's a specific kind of musical aesthetic that comes with it or something. So that was my impression. Whether, you know, perhaps I, you know, didn't spend enough time exploring the diversity that is there or was there, but that's the feeling I got, is this kind of monolithic, you know, musical environment where there was not a lot of diversity as in terms of sound.
But I think in Hong Kong, like even the radio station almost is personified in a sense, because like I think because there's so little radio stations in Hong Kong, to be honest, like in the UK, you know, in any given like postcode, you could probably get like 10 to 20 stations, right? And you know, I know because I studied there that they have laws governing what music you can play as a station, and you cannot step on other people's toes too much, otherwise you'll get fined as a station. Whereas in Hong Kong, I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist. You know, people like they play the same music that comes out of the different companies, right? And I think I say personified because the DJs are so famous. They can get so incredibly famous, and they're the ones that host the award shows as well. And the award shows are not like, it's not like the Grammys, which only is an award show in that sense. All the award shows are associated with a radio station. So, you know, the biggest one is TikTok, which is done by commercial radio. And then, you know, you have the RTHK Radio Television Hong Kong Radio Awards, you know, we have the Metro Awards, and now with the new free-to-air TV station, View TV, that has been very successful in capturing market share, to put it in a corporate sense. I think that's appropriate in this context. You know, they now have their own what's it called? Chill Club Awards. They have their own award show. They have their own daily like
show,
like live music performance show,
like Sunday,
like Top of the Pops, kind of thing. Yeah,
they are kind of better than Top of the Pops because they play live and don't do miming.
As far as you know.
As far as I know,
No, okay. I'm pretty sure that they did.
But you get the idea.
I'm pretty sure.
But you get the idea. Like
it definitely sounds like it's live.
Like Laters with Jules Holland, that kind of.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think to bring it back to the indie scene, like through all of this, we can understand that there is no space in the cultural imaginary of Hong Kong
marginalizing
for other types of music. Like not even talk about indie music or any specific kind of moniker for a genre or whatever, but you know, there's no space for alternative to the mainstream music in Hong Kong.
And I think that's, you know, perhaps pointing to the obvious, but this has to do with how small the market is, right? It's ultimately Hong Kong per se, if we're not looking at the extended market of Hong Kong, which I guess would be Guangdong and China, and potentially, you know, other regions,
like diasporic people and stuff.
But, you know, if we're just looking at the main market, which is Hong Kong, then that's 7.5 million people. And, you know, we know that, of course, music and cultural products in general, it's a high-risk investment for whoever promotes it. You don't know if it's going to be successful or not. And given that the market is not that big, of course, it's easy, I think, to imagine that companies promoting music would try to minimize the risk. And if they find a particular style or type of artist or type of song that sells, then they might invest in that better because there's not that many people to get money from, I suppose.
The amount of minutes available for consumers to consume the product is limited, very much more limited. Yeah, that's true. But does that mean that you know, with an entity like the indie listening and playing audience. I'm avoiding the word scene right now, but like, is the scene the best word to describe it?
Well, then we go back to your question.
Scene?
What is a scene, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big question in itself.
Yeah.
Should we go academic on this or not too much?
I think we can go lightly academic.
Lightly academic.
Like we could go back to our motto, which is use human language to talk about indie music.
Yeah.
Even though we're scholars.
I think the beauty of the term scene is that everybody understands it implicitly.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, it's something that, we're talking about a music scene. I think we don't really need to talk about it or to try to define it to get a sense as to what it is.
Yeah.
And so skipping, I think, the academic kind of debates and the roots and whatnot. But in fact, that was one of the reasons why the term got picked up in academia, is because it already existed in journalism. It already existed in common
vernacular,
you know. And so the academics who started to try to, you know, define it in more detail sort of picked up on that, you know, existence. But I think what is a scene? Well, maybe I like this. You know, this is coming from one of the early academics who talked about scene, who said it needs to be a kind of like cultural phenomenon or a kind of cultural thing where there is.
Who said it?
Oh, that would be Will Straw.
Ah, yes.
And he will. You know, credits due to him, said that basically when we're talking about a scene, we're really talking about a kind of social effervescence. There needs to be a surplus of social activity around something. It doesn't have to be music. You know, we could be talking about the chess scene. In Hong Kong. What does that mean? Well, that means usually implicitly, right? That, okay, there's somehow there's something happening around the practice of chess.
Yeah. That's more than just people playing at home with each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although, you know, people have debated that. Maybe there are scenes that, you know, are largely at home and things like this. But I think we could say this. A scene is maybe when there starts to be a little bit of extra sociability, extra kind of activities that take place around one particular cultural phenomenon.
And I think if we take that definition, right, I think the Hong Kong scene is pretty, I would say maybe even more legitimate to use that word than maybe other places where the scene is like huge, where we're talking about like tens and tens of hundreds of thousands of people, of fans across very wide localities, very wide places that are not easy to reach. It's not just like taking a train for half an hour or whatever, right? Like, I think one thing that came to mind was when people talk about how the scene was before 2019 and 2020-ish, was that, you know, it was always the same people, the same faces at shows. And I think that is the kind of extra sociality that we're talking about when we're talking about a scene, right? It's not just like, it's not like if we go to like a Metallica show or whatever, and you wouldn't recognize the person next to you, right? Like they just be like fans, and sure, that's a sociality in itself, but it's much less deep than multiple times of seeing the same person and maybe eventually, and it's happened to me where eventually we get to know each other. You know, I remember one time when it was quite early in my research during my MPhil actually, where I went to TTN's final show, and I didn't know anyone like back then. I pretty much didn't know anyone, and then Vic Sheng, the photographer. He came in. Music surveillance. Yeah, he came in, and I was like looking really awkward by the door. I was like, oh, what should I take pictures of? Where should I go? I was like, oh, this is really awkward. I'm here by myself. No one goes to a show by themselves, right? Yeah. And then he came over. He was like, hey, how's it going? And I was like, oh my gosh, he recognizes me. Someone recognizes me. And then I was like, okay, I feel so much more comfortable now. Yeah. Like, at least I kind of know someone here. Like, I'm not actually a fly on the wall.
So
with no other flies on the wall.
So by sociality, you guys may mean the kind of bonding that goes beyond the artifact per se. For example, when you are talking about everybody roots for something or has a kind of bond with the musical artifact, like the records or the songs or the stars themselves,
like being fans of the same band kind of thing.
But it's also the kind the kind of community that it's built beyond the or that is centered or centers around that artifact. So it's kind of like intangible bonding.
I mean, I think what I was thinking of is you can't really call a bunch of fans of the same band a scene.
And that's an important point. Is okay. There might be an element of community when we're talking about scenes. That surplus of right, like social interaction. But that's not all that a scene is or can be, right? So that's why actually the term has been productive in popular music studies, is because it has allowed people to talk about musical phenomena beyond just communities, to look, let's say, at infrastructures, like in order to make a music scene, we probably need like some venues. We probably need some people to talk about it. We probably need some publications. All of that is part of the scene in a way.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of fluid term which lacks boundaries, and some people have criticized it for that. It's not a very fixed, well-defined term, but it's precisely because it is not super clearly defined that it is productive. It allows us to talk about something around the music, which is interesting.
Well, the kinds of discourses include not limited to the words themselves, but also the totems or the symbols that go along with the community. For example, when a pop star has a logo and everybody follows that band and buy or the pop star buying the merch, and so I think you're right. It's beyond the community itself or beyond the sociality itself, but also the kind of good feelings that it comes along with being the part of the scene. So it doesn't have to be just the people. It can be, as you said, the venue or the good feelings about going to the venue.
Affect, emotions, right? That also contributes to a scene in a way. The kind of, I mean, that's also part of community, we might say, but still it's...
Or maybe the kind of antagonistic feeling against other groups, other scenes, perhaps.
I mean, what comes to mind is the rivalries between the local scenes in like the States that I've read about. Like what Champaign-Urbana versus, I don't know, like Seattle or something like that. Like they might actually be like, oh, we're better, and then another scene might be like, oh no, we're better, and then or like the hip hop kind of like the beef between like what East and West, right? East Coast, West
always
Coast.
is the kind of rivalry,
right?
Yeah.
Although at that point, and then we might say that we're bringing a question of identity into the fold, right? Which traditionally has been talked about in relation to subculture. And that was precisely why people who started to use the term scene were kind of trying to use a different term, because subculture has this identity kind of connotation to it or side to it, which I think a lot of people said, well, actually, this is not the way in which many people experience music. Beyond like the punk phenomenon from the 70s and like other kind of subcultures, hip hop was one, right? The majority of people, they experience music in a less committed way. Somebody might go to a concert on the weekend in whatever genre of music, but then they go back to their so-called regular life on Monday, and like the music is not really like, it's one part of their identity but not the whole thing. Which was the problem, I think, for subculture as a term. So, but still it's part of scene, right? The identity.
And I think I think people have described the pandemic pre-protest music scene as a kind of a very subculturally kind of place where, you know, like I felt it like that way. Like I remember feeling super out of place dressing like this and going to a show and then being like, oh, these people are like dressed up in their own way, you know, like they might be like, oh, very like
The
emo
metalheads.
looking, the metalheads, the goth people. I was like, oh, my hair's like short, you know.
Yeah. So it was more like
It's
in our group thing. And
Yeah.
when we talk about like the listeners of a particular genre can't be considered a part of the scene, because what comes to my mind is participation also plays a part in the scene. For example, you don't have to play music yourself, but when you are a part of a fan club, let's say, and you go there and help out, or you have like a temple to go to, that I think the part of participation, I mean, participation plays a part in like building the kind of scene.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I
Yeah.
would agree. But yeah, then a scene is a lot of different things potentially. But yeah, this is an interesting question, because you said pre-pandemic, perhaps like alternative, let's call it that, music in Hong Kong perhaps was more subcultural, where you needed to sort of perhaps pay your dues, or you know the right people, or I don't know, maybe dress a certain way.
I feel like it definitely helped to dress a certain way.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it different now?
Right now, I think it's very different. I think I definitely do not feel as out of place as I was. I think I think everyone felt an influx of new people into the scene during the pandemic period. You know, I wrote about it and I linked it to identity issues, you know, where people were looking for what it means to be a Hong Konger, what it means to support local culture and such. And so with all these new people coming in, they're not going to come in already dressed in their respective subculture, whatever they chose that to be, if they needed to do so. And so I felt like it kind of
Popularizing?
popular. I wouldn't say normalized it, but it popularized it a little bit.
Like lowering the threshold.
Like the threshold is much lower. Like if I felt uncomfortable like that, and I was already listening to that kind of music, how much more uncomfortable with someone who is new, completely new, who came from listening to canto pop and then suddenly fell into like a
Post-rock show,
like
or
a post-rock show or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine that, but I think the popularization, the slight popularization of that, the lowering of the threshold, made it even easier for more people to come into the scene. And so that's why I have that fun sort of thing, like that
The watershed.
that watershed moment, that watershed time of when things used to be and then now are. Although, again, I think things are constantly changing nowadays, and I think it's a little bit different now. But I think many aspects of that pandemic era, lowering of the threshold is here to stay, which I think
Most
is
likely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess all of this also leads to kind of what we want to talk about, which is, okay, what is indie in Hong Kong? And I feel that your experience, Jonathan, has to do with a particular community of, like, a specific style of music, maybe, which is, I correct me if I'm wrong, but seems to be like more rock based.
Sure.
I would say.
Yeah.
Sure. I think my exposure is definitely not unlimited, in the sense that because it's such a socially dependent scene. You know, it depends on relations between people, between bands, between venues, and between organizers and stuff. Ends up, especially now, you know, if I borrow R.O.O.T's the post-Hidden Agenda era, which is in your book, you should and one of those elements nice. One of those elements is the decentralization of the scene, right? Where there were no more like huge events, big venues where many different subsectors of the scene, to use another word, would get together and mix together. Right now, it's kind of all scattered. People, you know, the pop punk slash punk slash emo
core.
the core
The hardcore scene.
yeah, all those, they have their own little circles. And circles is a word that I used in my thesis because I think that was another way of looking at the pandemic scene, was circles instead of a unified Hong Kong scene per se.
Yeah.
But and then, you know, my circle that I tended to go around was, you know, kind of like emo bands. There were some kind of alternative, I would just say alternative in the Western sense.
Yeah.
Like emo.
So rock, I guess, of
Yeah.
sorts, like alternative
Alt
rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
alt
different
rock.
types of rock. Like I definitely didn't get into the electronic side of things
Right.
much. Besides some bands that use electronic elements. There's shoegaze stuff that I
Yeah.
was, I was going to shows with shoegaze bands, and such. And so, you know, yeah, I think my experience definitely is not indicative of the entire scene totally, but I think it's definitely reflective of it.
Yeah, but how do you define circle? But because circle to me, in relation to or with respect to scenes, is more like having boundaries and more with a more or clearer demarcation of in-group and out-group.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember the lady that we met after the...
SKS.
SKS,
Yeah.
She's Rain or Fish? I forgot. Rain, right?
I think Rain.
So she said she was once with the local death metal scene.
Yeah.
But to me, it's more like a circle because...
Did she use the word hun or...
I forgot.
Okay.
Maybe it's hun, like circle.
Yeah,
Because
I
it's more-
borrowed it from Cantonese as well.
Yeah, because it's more like when you think about going to band shows, it's not very likely that you are going to a death metal show. And if you are going to promote a death metal show, usually the metalheads will go. It's not like my wife will go to. But if you mean you're going to an indie show like at Aftermath, like I can like comfortably bring my wife along.
Right.
So maybe like the term circle to me, as I hear it, is more like a more bounded kind of social circle that you have in your mind. Am I right?
Yeah, that's...
Think about
I
this way.
think why I used the word circle was because I was trying to... I was borrowing from
Cantonese.
actor network theory. Well, Cantonese as well, but actor network theory, where I was trying to explain how...
When Cantonese and actor network theory overlapped.
Spicy. I was trying to explain how the scene is formed, how an idea of the scene is formed through social relations, and that these circles end up kind of becoming a scene. In a collective of circles become the scene in that sense. I didn't say it explicitly like that, but in a nutshell, that's kind of the idea. And because, you know, the decentralization, you know, if it's decentralized, then how is it a one thing, you know?
Yeah.
And it's through these relations, social relations, that bridge these circles, that penetrate all these circles and link them together in a very, of course, loose way. Nothing is super bounded. There's no centralized organization within each of these circles that govern their behavior. You know, tell people not to crowd kill in the show and stuff or whatever. But
It's interesting because when you know, I co-edited this book with my colleague from CityU, Damien Chayas, the book is called Fractured Scene, and this was very much because we were looking, I guess, more at experimental kind of music. So another perhaps, you know, subsector of what we could consider independent music in Hong Kong, but fragmented because a lot of people said, well, we said, you know, what do you think about the experimental music scene in Hong Kong? And a common response was always that, there's no scene in Hong Kong. So it was this kind of perspective that in fact, there is not really a scene to speak of.
Right.
Like there's not enough people or places or things happening to really say that we're talking about a scene.
But do we have a base number to reach in order to make a scene?
Yeah, like I think it's also relative, right? Like it's relative to their experience of a scene outside of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
In that sense, and then it comes back to the question, like, do we qualify to be called a scene? And honestly, does that matter? Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But I think the perspective by some people that there is no scene says something.
Yeah.
That there's a sense that, there's not enough or in Hong Kong to really be talking about something specific. And maybe it's like, what people would say is that there's like small groups, circles, perhaps in that term that you use. But can we really say that there's a scene? I agree with you. I don't think it matters, but
but I think I think especially when we take into account other forms of music socialities, like musical community, other terms, I think it's important to find a word that we all agree on and can, even if we review it from time to time, whether or not it's still relevant, I think it's still important that we, that we can call it something, and even if it's just for ease of when we talk about it, we can just use the word. Sure.
But the qualities of that something, I think, matter. Right?
For sure.
Which is why we use the adjective fractured. Because
I love that word, like when you use the fractured.
We wanted to convey the sense that we agree that there might be a scene, we don't need to quarrel over that, but what is this scene like? And the term fracture seemed to fit because we found like pockets, maybe elsewhere. I think I called it micro scenes. The further split hairs. But like that the scale of things was small, kind of fragmented, disjuncted, irregular, fragile, whatever. All those things we felt like was a constituent of what we could call, experimental or left field or alternative in Hong Kong. But this was all pre-pandemic. And I do feel that there's been a shift since then.
Well, what do you think that shift is like?
Well, I think that the change, again, to my perspective, and I realized that not speaking the language and not having that sort of cultural background, I'm missing out on a lot. But from my perspective, it seems that there's what you described makes sense to me, actually, in the sense that there's more people interested in different types of music that are not perhaps traditionally cantopop. You see the popularity of hip hop these days. You see, really different music styles seem to be sort of interesting different people. Perhaps people who would not be so interested in different forms of music are now into it. That's my general impression. I don't know what your impression is.
Right.
But now what makes people start to care about genres? Like, as I said in the past, when people are focusing more on lyrics than music, what makes the change?
Okay, I think this comes back to a cantopop genre or not genre. I think in this sense, it becomes a genre because people, people only think about genre when it's relative, right? Like if you only ever listen to rock in your life, you wouldn't call it rock music, probably. It'd just be music, right? But it's because of, like, I think I can link it back to my research where I talk about it as an identity issue where people were like, hey, you know what? Like, this cantopop music, it doesn't reflect what I want to say or what I want to be, what I want to express through my music listening or through my attending, my supporting support of this music or this industry, if we want to use that word. People were like, I think especially because of the movement, people realized that because of commercial pressures and because of many different commercial reasons, people want to maintain their a semblance of some sort of political centrism slash like inoffensiveness, like apoliticism, that they realize like, oh, this artist that I thought was, you know, like projected this image chose to stay silent during when I expected them to not. And then you know, I think people were like, oh, you know, my money is going to all of this, but then I don't feel like they're on the same side as me. They may not be on the other side, but at least they don't seem to be actively on my side. And I feel like, in a sense, this kind of corporatism became synonymous with not, you know, we have a term in Cantonese called late day, which means like Kennedy, which means
detached from the reality.
Yeah, like detached from reality, like Kennedy. Keen late day. Yeah, like very
really
detached from reality. Exactly. Yeah. So like, you know, that term, they were like, oh, these people are so late day. Like they want to find this more grounded, more grassroots kind of culture that is very definitely local, and like they can definitely verify that it's locally made, and like, you know, I guess in boutique in a certain sense, if we want to take the kind of like handicraft kind of term, right? It's a boutique product in the sense that it's not factory made, it's not mass produced. It's made by it's artisanal. In that
more
sense.
delicate.
More delicate. There's more intention put into it.
Lovely craft beers.
Way. Nice. Good plug. But yeah, you know, like this kind of thing, and I think the genre thing of whether Cantopop is a genre came up, where, you know, they see Cantopop as this big kind of corporately bounded entity. And therefore, indie was outside of that, and therefore was able to, at least the attitude. I think especially attitude is a very relevant word in the Hong Kong indie scene. People talk about attitude, Taito, all the time. Like whether this is the indie attitude of, you know, I'm guessing, you know, it mostly refers to, you know, having creative freedom, you know, doing what the artist wants and not caring about what other people think, not caring about what corporations think, especially that kind of thing. Very traditional kind of independent / indie culture kind of stuff. But in Hong Kong, the context is even more contextualized by Cantopop, where style comes into play, right? Where if it's not syrupy ballad music, then it's kind of automatically assumed to be indie music, especially if it's played by a bunch of people who are part of a band. You know, not just a backing band that hides in the corner, which is what happens in Cantopop concerts most of the time. But
because it's so star oriented.
It's very individually oriented. I think the Hong Kong entertainment sphere makes indie way more broad than it is in many other places, stylistically, right?
That would be my argument as well. In fact, that many things that would not be considered indie in different places in Hong Kong, they kind of effectively are.
So the discussion on what makes indie is like naturally or inevitably political, because the notion of indie and people's idealistic expectations or wishful thinking that indie music must be local, indie music must be grassroots, puts a lot of pressure on us, indie musicians, and that's one thing. And you also mentioned circles and the connections that make the circles, or connect the circles together to make a scene. Do you think the connection is like politically oriented more than anything else, like affectual or that kind of connections?
Friends.
Really?
Yeah, honestly, like I think they're primarily just friends first. Like I think politics in the very traditional sense, like we're talking about like the fight for democracy kind of stuff, values and stuff. It comes and goes. It depends on whether it's a big issue at the time and people feel an urgency for it. But mainly the thing that holds all of these circles together is just people
Friends.
friends who want to do stuff together. Like I think
Right.
like maybe like one organizer is part of one circle that is very this is not based on any real thing, but like very maybe like, oh, they do punk shows, but then they also really like shoegaze, and then one of these days they're like, hey, you know what, let's do a mixed show, a zapgam show, that kind of thing, like a.
Do we still have this? This is so
I don't
like
think so.
This is year 2000.
Is it?
Yes.
I mean, I'm also quoting from the guys that we interviewed last time in the Zeppelin hot dog organizers, where they talked about back when they were audiences, they used to, well, they also did organize these.
Yes.
What's a good English word for zapgam show? Like
a miscellaneous show?
miscellaneous.
I just like literally potluck show, yeah.
Like a mixed genre show where
Yeah.
everyone, there's just like
You
a
have
mix of
everything,
genres.
yeah,
It's not like
in a
any
show.
bounded by any sort of musically stylistic
Yeah.
kind of connotation.
And that's why we have a term like Siggy break bands.
Siggy break bands.
Like Yin break.
Cheesecake break.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. That sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah, because there are bands that you don't want to hear, you don't want to watch, so you just go and have a Siggy.
I've been part of those bands.
Siggy break.
I've been part of those bands. Yeah, Siggy bands, Siggy
Yeah.
break bands.
Like
It's
if it
Afghan,
was like
yeah.
a big show and you can observe like people moving and stuff, you would just see like
Oh,
once
big band.
X band ends,
Yep.
just like a mass exodus out of the venue onto the street to have like a smoke, and then they'll all
Yeah.
come back exactly half an hour afterwards when
Yeah,
when they
yeah.
expect that new band to be finished.
Yeah, so that's when like 6 bands are in the same band show, each of them like playing for like 30, 35 minutes, and that's when we had the potluck band. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that
Oh,
happens
great
now
memories.
actually.
No, not really.
Especially because of the decentralization
Yeah.
aspect.
It's more theme based right now, and you're like intentionally or like consciously putting similar bands together, and people didn't care too much those days as
Yeah.
long as they've got people going to the factory like premises to watch the band shows. They are fine with that,
Yeah.
and it was very cheap back then.
Man, I saw
But I'm not complaining though. I'm not complaining.
The good old
Yeah.
days.
The good
Yeah,
old
the good old days.
like,
Yeah,
you know the love song, right? They've been
Yeah.
posting like these old posters from like
yeah,
the early 2000s and stuff,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
$50 for a show? What?
yeah. Sometimes it came at like 20, 30. Yeah, but now like.
How much is it now, like average,
Like
would you say?
280, like
Yeah,
at
right?
least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really expensive to go to a show now. Even
I just paid for one, 420, even
Yeah.
though there was one outside band, but still, like,
But now people can pay for it. They can afford it.
Yeah.
Don't know why.
yeah.
The kids nowadays can
Actually,
afford it.
Not until recently, that was true.
Mm.
I think now everyone's on holiday,
Yeah.
and they're like going to Japan and wherever for holiday, and
Okay.
and honestly, like I've heard from many organizers that they're struggling crazy,
Ah.
like they're crazy struggling. They cannot sell tickets.
Mm.
because people are not here.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just not here, or they just don't want to spend the money on it. And
Oh.
for whatever reason, like I haven't done a census or anything. I probably should, but
So that's a low season for organizers.
right now it's like
During
a
summer
huge
holiday
low
or
season
breaks,
compared
yeah.
to the pandemic era, especially.
We might also be getting over the initial urge to socialize that came out, when
Yeah,
I guess this is specific to Hong Kong, right? But
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
reopened mostly, I guess, like less than a
early
year
last
ago.
year.
Mm.
Yeah, early this year. Sorry.
And there was this great big push to do things together, to finally be able to gather and see your
Yeah.
friends or your family. And in that sense, I'm, this, like you, right? I haven't done like any empirical research on this, but I'm pretty sure that, music then became an excuse for people to come together and spend an evening doing something fun. And in that sense,
Yeah.
that benefited, I think, also different genres of music.
Yeah,
Probably. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I think Bofoxek, right? Like
Yeah, revenge.
revenge style,
Yeah, revenge, exactly. Revenge.
Event going.
Concert going.
revenge style
yeah,
concert
yeah.
going. Yeah, I remember it was a really big deal when like the first Cantopop artist like did the show after the so-called like during the pandemic,
Lockdown, yeah.
like after the so-called lockdowns. Yeah, like
Who was it? I forgot.
Lam Yiman.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure it was Lam Yiman.
Yiman,
Like,
okay.
like they made a big deal out of it.
Okay.
They were like, oh, it's the first like concert after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then it was in person, even though I think it was like 4 people and in one space and then 4 people in one space.
Okay. Yeah, so
But-
well positioned at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was also at the Coliseum, right? It was like, yeah, so the Coliseum is a very big venue in Hong Kong. David Bowie played there
Yeah.
in the 80s or something. It's like the what do you call it? The holy grail of Hong Kong entertainment.
Yeah,
Like-
the Coliseum, yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something for people if they're not from Hong Kong or don't know Hong Kong. That's a huge cultural landmark for music, right? The
what would it be
Coliseum.
like the equivalent of? Like
Madison
Wembley?
Square Garden,
Yeah,
Yeah.
MSG, yeah.
Wembley,
Wembley.
in the UK.
Yeah, it would basically be that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of the biggest venue, which is a kind of a crowning achievement in some artists' musical career.
Especially in Cantopop, like they make. I mean, you can
Yeah.
confirm or not, but like it seems to be a huge deal when they finally get to
To the Hong Kong
to
Coliseum.
step on the stage at Coliseum.
Like 去紅館 is a big thing.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Going to the Coliseum is a big thing. So they make a fuss about it. They promote everywhere, saying that you have to be pop enough. You have to be like popular enough in order to go to the Coliseum. But nowadays,
That's the assumption.
It is changing. Yeah, like it is more or less like as long as you have the money to organize a show there, you can be there.
But that also implies a certain amount of popularity, right?
Exactly.
Like you have to justify it.
True.
Unless you're like super rich and you don't mind playing to like 5 people.
True.
So there's, I guess, a kind of litmus test. Maybe have we seen in recent months non-cantopop artists play at the Coliseum or not yet?
Debatable. Tyson Yoshi. Did he play at the Coliseum? I think he did, right?
I don't
Let me
know.
just Google it.
Yeah, but most like foreign bands will choose other venues like the Asia
Asia Expo,
Expo,
right?
yeah, or even like small ones like Kai Tak.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think Kai
Yeah,
Tak
he
is
did.
close. Oh,
He did.
but how are we going to?
Or like Zhao Guoyin, like he's more
Andy
rock
Chow.
oriented.
Okay.
Yeah, Andy Chow. And Andy actually brought a bunch of indie bands onto the stage, like NYC,
really?
A New World If You Can Take It, and a bunch of others. I only remember NYC mainly, just because I was like, what?
Okay.
But yeah, that was interesting. I think, and symbolic in a sense.
Yeah, I think some bands. I mean, some stars are trying. Some pop musicians are trying.
I think, I mean, to me, perhaps I'm wrong, but I feel that, if you play at the Coliseum, it means that you have entered Hong Kong culture. International acts, will play the Asia World Expo, but it's a kind of big impersonal venue that can, hold a lot of people, but you're not really part of the Hong Kong musical landscape.
Yeah.
I think we get all those images of like the artists like shaking hands with people on like because it's always a 360 stage, right? It's
Yeah.
always like a seimin toy, like 4-sided, where it's in the
Stage,
middle,
yeah.
and then the building kind of like slopes outwards, right? So
Yeah.
then like people like the artists would come and like shake hands of the people who can pay for the first row.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the bands who could go to Hong Kong Coliseum, there were a few, right?
Rubber band.
Rubber Band, a Supper
right.
Moment.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And those are interesting artists, I feel, because they're kind of crossover between cantopop and what we could call indie, maybe.
Yeah, but wait, actually, like some 30 years ago, there were indie bands going to the Coliseum.
Beyond.
No, like a collective of indie bands going to Coliseum. I think there was a history about that. Not Gosan, not anywhere else, but Hong Kong Coliseum. I think Ha was also there.
Who?
Ha.
Huh? Really?
Yeah, I think that was like in the 1990s when the like indie bands start to emerge again.
Right. Okay, I will confirm on that
Yeah,
later.
correct me if I'm wrong, but like faint
Interesting.
memories told me that.
Okay.
Like even indie bands who dreamt of going there were there. But
Right.
now, if I were able to play big venues like them, I may exclude myself from Hong Kong Coliseum because, as
It means too much.
yeah, Francois said, it means too much to as an indie band.
There's too much connotation with the mainstream, is it?
True, like a
Yeah.
connection with a pop scene or the canto pop scene in general. So it means you must have done something like not indie in order to be there.
Yeah, you must have
sold
sacrificed.
your soul.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you must have done something.
Some,
like you
yeah,
must have sold out
something. Yeah, sucking something. Sorry. Yeah, cut that. Cut that.
But,
right.
But yeah, I mean, like, I totally get it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like if I saw a band that I liked on the stage at the Coliseum, and I wasn't thinking academically about it, and like thinking about power relations and cultural
That's right.
domination
Cultural
and
capital.
whatever, cultural capital and whatever, like I would be like, huh, they must have done something to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like. And you know, if it was
Something
like
fishy.
if it wasn't like empty by the time the show started, like
The Siggy Breaks.
I mean, yeah, Siggy breaks.
Yeah.
Like if the entire scene was there, I don't know if they'd fill this Coliseum actually. I think they might, like only just, but like just once,
Yeah.
right? I think it's like a 12,000 seater, but honestly, like the scene is small. But I think all of what I'm hearing with all of what we've talked about is that the scene is very much defined against the mainstream in Hong Kong. As I'm not sure what's your experience with like other scenes, especially like Montreal.
I mean, it's always the same sort of rhetoric in whatever placing, locations you look at. It's always, I mean, indie is, positioned, self-positioned against a putative, sometimes imagined kind of mainstream, right? So part of being indie historically has been about not being super popular, not being the next, the big thing, oftentimes not being supported by major labels or major corporations otherwise. So in that sense, it's similar, I would say, in Hong Kong. But, a lot of people have argued that the divide between what is indie and what is mainstream is porous.
Yeah.
And it's in fact a kind of a fake dichotomy, right? It's and in terms of industry, that has been the case for many decades by now, where major record labels have had specific A&Rs, scouting indie artists, and it's very difficult
Like
to
labels opening little labels that are like
yeah
that don't have the Sony label
Exactly.
or the, oops or like don't have the whoa, or don't have anyway like that's been common practice for a long time, right?
for a long time.
Yeah.
It depends how we define indie, right?
Yeah.
If we define indie from an industrial perspective, if we define indie from a stylistic perspective, if we define indie from a social perspective, we may come up with different answers in the Hong Kong context, I think.
Right, yeah.
Certainly, I think industrially, we start to see hip-hop becoming part of, or becoming a focus.
Yeah.
From the major recording companies, right?
I think it's moving slowly, right? Like, because I think the hip hop artists that can actually get up onto that stage, they're veering away from like the more purist kind of hip hop that they might have been before, but at least it's still moving in that direction, like alternative forms of music besides the syrupy ballads are, getting up onto that stage. Getting up onto the Coliseum stage, so to speak, as people always say. So I think it's very interesting with the way that things are moving right now. We have opened this called the Tasty Yellow Treat, which is an Imperial Mango Cheesecake Pastry Sour.
So good.
That's
the name of it.
Oh man, conditioned on Australian mangoes and Tahitian vanilla bean. Contains lactose.
I thought it tastes like caramel, but as it says, it tastes. It's like mango cheesecake. So I have to change my mind right now. Yeah, but it definitely tastes slightly sour. But I get that caramelly
nice.
taste, aftertaste.
the body is kind of like subdued a little bit. It's like subtle,
Yeah.
but I really like it.
I do.
It's sour, but not aggressively so.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it's got a really nice balance.
So is it hazy as well?
I'm pretty sure you won't be able to look through it on the glass.
Nice. I always like hazy.
Yeah, this is kind of like for all you beer people out there, I'm so sorry.
Not having like a proper cup.
I wanted to. I was like, should I break out my IPA like glasses and bring them over? And then I was like, oh, my bag
you're
is
gonna
so
break
full.
them.
I'm gonna
Next
break
time.
them. Like,
Yeah.
But these are the cups that you get in a Hong Kong style diner for your milk tea.
Your takeaway.
For your takeaway, yes.
Takeaway milk tea.
So I think it's still fitting in a certain sense.
Yeah. To our context. Yeah.
To our to context.
To context. Yeah.
Context.
Not the beer.
To context.
Yeah, but the beer is great. The beer is great. Really.
Which reminds me, a little bit ham-fisted, but language and
Whoa.
and the divide between mainstream and indie.
Yes.
I think that's a huge
Super
thing.
interesting.
Yeah. Like I think where it gets watery and murky is when indie music sings in Cantonese. Wow. For the most part. Like I think it's definitely not all the time.
Yeah.
Like if you sing Cantonese metal, like it's pretty difficult to be called mainstream in that sense.
Oh.
But when it comes to more accessible genres, to put it in one way,
Well, language-wise, the watershed will be singing Cantonese in the colloquial Cantonese,
Sure.
or you are singing more official business-like or literary-like
version
poetic.
yeah.
Cantonese lyrics.
Yeah.
I think the main watershed would be that. For example, like
Very
MLA.
Yeah.
So you can't expect MLA to sing like poppy Cantonese songs because they write in the more colloquial or more or the themes that are closer to us and things that are way more loose than what the like the official or the more proper Cantonese song can explore.
Yeah.
Because when you think about like going to the motel with your girlfriend or with your boyfriend, you can't basically say,
Quintessential Hong Kong.
yeah,
sort of
you can't
practice.
basically you can't basically sing that if you are like who's
Like
that?
it-
like Aga or,
Yeah.
or people like these people or Mirror can't possibly sing songs about going to the love motels in Kowloon Tong.
It's too untoward, should I say?
Yeah.
Sorry, new
Yeah.
question, but who's
Yeah.
MLA?
My Little Airport.
My Little Airport.
Of course, of
Sorry,
course.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
But My Little Airport also brings into question brings to fore the issue of quality in that sense, because My Little Airport is very much bedroom pop,
Lo-fi.
in the sense, not in the sense that it's like those lo-fi beats
But
that
not
you listen
unproduced.
to on YouTube
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, but
It's
not
not unproduced,
Yeah.
but it's definitely DIY, very
Yeah.
much DIY in aesthetic.
Yeah.
Whereas Cantopop is always super clean.
Hyper saturated songs.
Like you wouldn't hear someone sitting down on a stool in the recording,
and no
or
dyna-
like doing like
yeah, and no dynamic at all. Yeah, very
Yeah.
little dynamic nowadays.
yeah.
Yeah. But what was the question again? Like
But like
the language,
like that is also again like another
the boundary.
dividing line, right? Like if it's too shiny, if the recording and the production is too shiny and it's kind of going towards that kind of poppy direction, it then becomes murky in a sense, I think.
So that depends on whether you are doing that on purpose or is really the actual constraints that you have. For example, like Iron and Wine, like how he started as like a down and out musician.
Right.
That he only had one guitar and like an SM58. I can't remember.
Sick.
Yeah, just one guitar and an SM58, and he
Nice.
made like a
Like the Bon Iver story.
yeah. Oh, that's Bon Iver, not
Oh,
Iron
you're
and
thinking
Wine.
about
Yeah,
Bon Iver.
I was actually thinking about Bon Iver.
For Iron and Wine too, though.
Yeah,
Right.
and you when you think about the quality, so that was like unintentional at the start because of the real constraint, but then when you build the expectation that now they become famous, you can't possibly expect them to produce music in the same old way. So like later Bon Iver albums is more polished, but still the way that he produced the way he composed songs. But I think the same case applies in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
When you become a little bit more financially supported after getting support by fans or things like even now, MLA is more polished in terms of production.
Yeah, I think they have become a little bit more polished. In that sense.
So in terms of support, what makes an indie band indie? For example, nowadays even like indie bands have sponsors. Like even we have sponsors.
Wait.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also the dimension that advanced recording technology has become available.
Yeah,
most,
true.
Right? Like
it's so easy, right?
Any bedroom band can record on Pro Tools.
I can connect this to the computer via USB.
Yeah, exactly. So
if I wanted to.
I think that in a sense it becomes more difficult to sound lo-fi. It has to be
intentional.
It is becoming intentional, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's true.
And that has to like corroborate your personality, and that fits into your persona. That if you have been rustic all along, when you suddenly become very polished, people start to question your authenticity, right?
Yeah.
So has indie got to do with anything like about authenticity and the sincerity that we mentioned in another interview that Rocky pulled together? So I mentioned the word sincerity. So you have a sincerity in it. It's not formulaic, and that would be, I think, to me, the core of doing indie in Hong Kong, or maybe doing indie in general. Yeah, sincerity.
It's like the attitude, right? Like if we put it...
Yeah,
Would you say that that's true, or...?
Yeah, so maybe when you think about like going on crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, that kind of stuff, you are still trying to do things yourselves. You're still trying to get your message across. So I think the message is also important. So even when you are doing like love songs, doing like slow songs, ballads and whatnot, as long as it fits into your persona, it fits into your narrative, I think that matters more than what kind of genre that you are playing.
And I think that's especially important because in Cantopop, a lot of the time the lyricist is not
the singer themselves.
Not the singer, yeah. Like everyone is super separate, right?
Yeah.
Like you have the arranger, you have the composer of you might have a melody like writer.
The production flow.
Yeah, the production flow, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's so fragmented. It's so
And different people get fame from this, right? Lyricists.
Yeah,
lyricists.
For sure.
That's something that from a outside perspective, let's say, is not completely distinct with Hong Kong pop music. I mean, French pop is kind of also like this. Some lyricists are quite famous. But it is clear in Hong Kong, right? And I have a colleague who's a famous lyricist, and they get public recognition in a way that you don't see in many other places. I would say.
Yeah, even the Swedish like songwriter, like Song Factory people,
Max Martin.
Yeah, Max Martin. They've only recently become like quite famous, right? Whereas they've mostly been ghostwriters. Like people who write music have mostly been ghostwriters. Whereas in Hong Kong, like Lam Zik is like a superstar.
Or Wyman Wong.
Or Wyman, yeah. Like these people who purely write lyrics. They're like as famous, more famous than a lot of singers.
Yeah.
In that sense, and
So if we use this idea of sincerity as like a marker of indie, let's say, could we say then that I don't know I don't know my pop music landscape that well in Hong Kong, but somebody like Panther Chan,
right, debatable,
right.
Yeah, I've heard it from other people that it's debatable.
Okay.
Not just myself.
Okay.
Like I remember. Okay, there was one very vivid memory where I was at a festival,
Okay.
Unison 2021, where it was primarily indie bands, and then Panther Chan was kind of slotted in like the 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock slot or something. Not exactly like headline, but close. And then at first, you know, when the indie bands are playing, you know, it's like a big indie show in like a not small venue, but not huge either. It was McPherson Stadium, which is like 1,000
Yeah, it's
1,000
mid-level
seater.
venue.
Yeah, mid-level. And then when Panther Chan was about to go up, a bunch of like these LED signs just appeared out of nowhere. And once her show ended, they all left. And then it kind of reset back to like normal.
Okay.
In that sense.
What are LED lights?
Oh, it's like
The
the
banner thing.
It's like a banner where the LEDs like spell out her name and stuff.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't
Yeah, like the type that you would see in the Coliseum being like
Okay.
waved by the fans and stuff.
Okay.
The LED signs were pretty jarring in that atmosphere, especially like maybe like the last set people were moshing, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden the LED signs come out and
Yeah.
yeah, which is kind of, in a way, it felt like an invasion
I don't
of
think
culture, like a cultural
Yeah.
invasion of that. In that sense, it was like Taichung, like a
yeah, gate crashing.
You're not,
Yeah,
you're
gate
not
crashing,
one of
yeah.
us, but here you are.
yeah, kind
Yeah.
of. But it's also interesting because she has a lot of, I think she has a lot of friends in different, with different organizers and different entities
Yeah.
in the scene, and that's how she gets the shows. And you know, with Mike Orange, like her
Yeah.
guitarist used to be a guitarist of one of the biggest bands,
Chochukmo.
Chochukmo, yeah.
So it's not a problem that whether she is or is not indie or doing indie, is the public perspectives on her
Yes.
as a musician or not.
Yes.
Because people know her as like a judging panel for the Star Making Show on
yeah.
View TV more than her. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe they know her more about her work on TV than her musical work, or maybe that's because of
Most
her
likely.
musical work that leads them to watch the TV show. I don't know, but at least to me, yeah, I know her more about her TV work than
Right.
than
It was
her
just very
involvement.
awkward.
Yeah,
It
true.
was just very awkward. Like, a lot of people had already had dinner, so they didn't really have an excuse to leave again.
Yeah, and I also think about the kind of collaborations between like mainstream and indie people, because when you talk about Mike
Yeah.
Orange, so we were playing together as a group, but not exactly in the same band, but we were in the same like community, the same
circle?
circle. Yeah,
Cool. Nice.
the circle that centers around a studio
Yeah.
called group.
Like,
as
you
I-
all rented the studio together, right?
a friend of us, is a studio owner,
Oh,
and we
okay.
record there, and we go to show. We went to show together. We played show together.
Yeah.
So we see that we saw them grow into like very established indie musicians, and they got awards, they got record deals, and then they start to part ways. And they have more like involvement in the local, mainstream music
Yeah,
scene.
yeah.
Like now, Jan Curious, the singer of the R.O.O.T band. And he's also doing his solo work.
Yeah.
And then in Cantonese, I
Yeah.
have never thought that Jan will do Cantonese songs, and he writes Cantonese songs right now. I'm not sure whether
Yeah.
he writes them or somebody writes for him,
Yeah.
but
I'm
I
not sure.
remember very vividly when he started out as a Chochukmo frontman. He was very sure that he wanted to sing English and he wanted to go to Glastonbury. He said that, and
I remember that.
we had like videos of them playing as Chochukmo in leather outfits
Really?
as a rock band. He always wanted to be like Pete Doherty. Yeah, but now he is himself, and he's still very good. I must say, and I'm
Sure.
We saw how Pete Doherty
yeah,
evolved.
but he turns in another way. He now works out, and he's leading a very healthy lifestyle.
You mean Pete Doherty or?
Or Jan.
Okay.
Yeah, so the question right now is, are we still accepting Jan as an indie musician or he's like a borderline indie? How are we going to define that?
Another case, right, of those like crossover. I think when we start paying attention, I think to how, particularly in in environments where it's not that big, like Hong Kong, right, like you start to realize that everybody tends to be connected, to different circles, so to speak, or to different scenes, or maybe
it doesn't take many degrees of separation to get to a pop star.
Exactly.
True. Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
So again, that distinction between indie and mainstream is, in my view, it's significant because it allows us to talk about different things.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's really hard to pin down, and it's oftentimes imagined. It's a matter of discourse and narratives and identities, perhaps more than hard realities. I feel.
Yeah, I think like it reminds me of how I defined it in my MPhil thesis, where I talked about it being defined by alternativity and autonomy, where some scenes talk about like some sort of notion of authenticity, whereas I think in Hong Kong the 真誠, like the sincerity is more important. But I think I boil it down to what does sincerity mean? It means alternative and autonomous. But in recent years, especially during the pandemic period, I think a lot of people were realizing that this notion of alternativity is kind of constraining. And it's very tiring for some musicians to kind of like need to maintain this sort of notion of alternativity for the sake of not pissing off their fans or whatever. Yeah. And I think even the fans themselves, I think they also they're looking further than just musical style and its difference all relative to the mainstream. And I think and they're looking at this sincerity. They're trying to boil it down further to look for that attitude that they want to find, that sort of boutique-ness of the craft that they're looking for to represent what it means to be local, what it means to support local culture in that sense. And so alternativity, I'm arguing, is that it's disappearing it's getting lower and lower in priority. And in importance.
In priority, you mean among audiences and artists?
Both, yeah. Like, I think people have kind of gotten sick of it, of being like, hey, this alternativity thing, it just meant that no one listened to our music.
Yeah.
Or alternativity for alternativity's sake meant that no one listened to our music. Maybe if we just be real to ourselves, then we can, if good things happen, then good things happen. If no one listens, then at least we're happy,
And we can start thinking about like meeting listeners halfway there. And I want to chime in with one more example, like Serini.
Yeah.
So
that's a good example.
Yeah, she's not signed by particular labels, right?
No.
So she's all by herself.
Pretty sure.
And she is open. She's honest. She doesn't care too much about things, but she makes her scene. I think before I go on, there's one more thing that I might want to add, is that after coming back from Sydney, I went to have a drink with a friend called Jason Zhang, who played in the star making show on ViuTV. And we actually knew each other some years ago. And I said, it's getting really, really hard to go back to the scene, to come back to the scene. And he said, what scene? You can make your own scene. I think maybe I'm still sticking with the ideology of belonging to a scene that a particular group of musicians or bands are creating, that I want to go in because they are the ones that are legitimate. But then if we go back to Serini, he doesn't care too much about going to like university band shows or doing different kinds of going to underground, for example. Playing at underground or going to Wange. So she writes her own music, she has her own narrative, she has her own merch, and she has her own scholarship.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And she has her own like feminist theories or narratives, and she has a large group of fans, not necessarily labeling themselves as indie listeners or indie audience.
Sure.
So how are we going
That's
to
true.
define,
That's
or how are we
true.
going to describe this?
It kind of questions my
phenomenon.
whole idea of you can't have fans of one band / artist cannot be a scene. Like it kind of questions that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was not trying to challenge, but I was just, I just remind myself that I was once questioning my existence in the scene as a musician, because I am getting old, not like the young and upcoming musicians like Jason, Diane Squat Jason.
Right.
So I often compare myself to the new bands right now, or the new musicians right here right now, and I kept thinking how I am going back to the scene. So as if the scene or the boundary is really there, that I have to be from an out group to go back to the in group. But then suddenly somebody told me, well, you don't have to care too much about whether you're in a scene or not. It matters more that you do something, you make something to at least prove your existence. Yeah. So I think that was one thing that I want to say, on my part.
I think this is interesting, and it sort of goes back to what I was saying a little bit at the beginning of the discussion. You know, this notion of in-group, out-group. That's the kind of like thinking that has been associated with the notion of subculture, where, you know, like the subculture positions itself explicitly as the out group against the in group, so to speak, right? So there's that desire, for alternativity, really, that is there and articulated as something that we want to do. Whereas the notion of scene does not, at least we talk about a scene specifically because it doesn't have that desire necessarily to create an us versus them kind of perspective. It's more fluid. And so that's why it's hard to talk about, because it is fluid. And, a scene is also temporary sometimes, right? And it changes, shape or participation, characteristics. So it's really kind of, always ever evolving. What was once a scene may not be, moving forward or at a different moment in time. So that I think, and that's why it's a particularly useful term to talk about indie in Hong Kong, because clearly it feels to me that everything that we've been talking about is like how things are difficult to define and how things change, so
Right.
it's not just us against them, I think.
For sure.
That's why you can create your own scene.
So let's not think about like binary.
Exactly.
For sure.
So,
I think that's a lot of what I've heard people saying, like, oh, stop thinking of it as indie and mainstream, just think of it as music. And I think, I referenced it before, Wang Chunfeng, the Chinese music scholar, he talked about the othering tendencies in defining Chinese music and how Chinese music has been defined. And so he talked about 回歸音樂回歸音樂 like going back to the basics of music, taking away the labels and looking at it first as a common creation of humanity, as opposed to a nationalistic definition, an ethnocentrist definition, or a not mainstream definition of music, and first appreciating it for what it is first, and then that gives those labels new meanings that then take away those negative connotations that could limit what it can be. And I
Yeah.
think that's very important. And I think that is a great note to end on today.
I think so.
Yay! And so, yeah, thank you very much for listening
Thank
to our
you.
podcast.
Yeah.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you so much.
And remember, Drover's Thirst.
Drover's
Also,
First.
thank you, Groovy, for sponsoring us the studio space, as always.
Thank
Good
you.
stuff.
Lovely
Yeah,
space.
Lovely
amazing
lighting.
space in the very, very typical neighborhood for indie bands.
Yay.
Sampoku.
Yeah,
Sampogon.
Sampogon. All right, so, bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.